Okay. It's rolling. Cool. They come inside. Okay, are you ready? Okay, I've got a question.
Yeah.
Tell me about your relationship with water.
When I think about water, I think about my grandma. I think about her. I've come to understand her water that she presented to me. So I was presented with a sea in a bottle. I had to make sense. I had to believe, and not because I was forced, but by virtue of life. I've seen what this water has done for me, what it's still doing for me, how it's grounding me, how it's quenching my thirst spiritually, physically. So my relationship with water goes as far as from a swimming pool to a tap to a borehole, to the ocean, which has always been the mother body, the mother water. But I'm scared of the ocean.
You scared?
I'm scared.
Why?
It's fear of the unknown. It's the fear of the unknown. It can give, it can take life. And that's why I'm scared of it. But I don't know how it felt to be in it. As the non-made body of water. So I know what it is when it exists in a man-made structure that can hold. But as a body of water that's non-made, that's not man-made, that's holding itself, that I'm scared of, and I don't want to tempt it. And that is why I play. That is why I play it. Because I don't want to traumatize myself. So my relationship with water has often been of respect, where I approach it with caution, because I know it can snap anytime. I don't know.
I think something that's so interesting is this idea that the sea traveled to you in a vessel.
Yeah.
And I grew up in an environment where I went to the sea regularly.
Yeah.
And I feel like in many ways I have like two oceans, you know. I've got two oceans in my history, or maybe even three. And initially, my first relationship with the sea was so much excitement and bliss about going to the coast, going to Pondoland especially. And that ocean it's untamed in a way, you know?
Yeah.
And I think its wilderness is really so much about how we can characterize one's relationship with the sea in that space, especially.
In space, yeah.
And I was always so excited about the prospect of play, with that space. But in amongst this feeling of feeling tapping into my own wilderness, coming from Joburg, going to Pondoland, mostly in Decembers and Aprils.
So you've always visited water?
I've regularly visited the ocean.
You've regularly visited the ocean.
But what was weird at the time is that I started to learn that there's a certain way.
Yeah.
Like, I guess for there was a moment where I stopped visiting the ocean and I was visiting the beach. Do you know what I mean?
Wow.
It was about being was about being on the beach, not about being in the ocean. And I bared witness, and I even enacted this performance of beaching.
Yeah. Wow.
Dressing in a certain way, holding certain standards of beauty, in this fantastic stage of how one goes to the ocean. And even when I was younger, it didn't make sense to me.
Yeah.
Before it started to make me angry, and I feared that time. I feared participating in that. And I think that was a major shift that offered me a second ocean, was when I rejected the way I think my family have a relationship with the ocean.
The ocean.
I rejected that and started to, I think maybe I'm still trying to have a relationship with the ocean that makes sense to me.
I love that. The ocean that makes sense to you.
Yeah.
Because I think my relationship has always been that this water comes to me. We get it from our neighbors who are 12 Apostle, who visits the sea often in December for church trips. So then they bring us this water at home. And then my grandmother, every once in 2 weeks, I have to bath with that sea water. So again, it's always been a given sea. It's always been a culture that I was born into, a ritual, a habit that I was born into. Whereas now, trying to define what the ocean is to me has often been playing these things. Like now, I'm trying to make sense of my relationship going to the sea now, going to the beach now.
Yeah.
Which I never had that relationship for almost 20 or 24 years. I've never visited the sea. It's always been a thing that I respect. I know it exists there.
Yeah.
But it's been something that every once in 2 weeks, this is seawater.
It's so interesting what you're saying, because it's like this imagined
Yeah.
idea of the mother body.
The mother body.
But this intense intimacy regularly with the ocean.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think that's really interesting.
And it's, I'm trying to understand it as well. Yeah. That's why when we began, I spoke about a materialized imagination. That it's what I'm trying to make sense of, is that this thing that I've always imagined, but I've got this close relationship with it. It's like, how are you in love with a thought, an idea, and then you practice that thing as if it's living?
Isn't that our relationship with people that have passed?
That's our relation. And this is where then the importance of visiting the sea comes. I don't know if I've had it or always had it in my mind that I visit the ocean, not the beach. It's quite a very
Yeah, it's changed for me. I mean, I think that there are the kind of beaches that I think also have a kind of wilderness, the same way the ocean feels vast. There are some beaches that feel sprawling. And that isn't, you can't perform in those spaces. There's no one there to see. You know? You perform for yourself, and in so doing, it becomes a game.
It becomes a game, yeah.
Of practicing what is the ocean to you then.
I like that. It becomes a game of practicing. So ideally, we could all be just locked in a game of practicing whatever our ancestry has given us. It could be. We're not saying it is. We're saying it could be.
Yeah.
When did physically your relationship with water, with the sea change?
Change.
Or when was your sea moved?
Yeah.
How did you move from a beach into the ocean? Because I know I moved from the sea inland in a bathtub in a Vascom when I lost my grandma.
Okay.
So I could only visit the sea after I've lost her, because that's when I can now converse with the sea even more.
Yeah.
Like when she was alive, I know it's something I respected, the sea.
Yeah.
I couldn't play it. And it's not something to be played. But in understanding a human relationship to water, to the sea, play is one way of inquiring.
Yes.
But I know that it's when I lost my grandmother that I lost my grandmother when I was 10. From 10 to like 24, I continued bathing with seawater, drinking seawater, using it to sprinkle around. But the experience of being at sea for my body was something else. And that's what scares me. But it's only like in 24 that I was able to go to Cape Town. And my first point in encountering the sea was actually encountering my grandmother. Because at this point I could see her. I could understand the movement, the motion, that it cleans itself, it's breathing. I could understand it through her voice. So I materialized all those images.
Yeah.
Those images suddenly made sense.
Yeah.
Everything made sense.
Yeah.
But again, it's always been a thing of respect. That's why I don't visit it often. That I'm aware of when I visit the sea.
Yeah. I think
What shifted your sea?
I really love what you're saying, because I think that there was my respect for the ocean felt like a kind of knowledge that no one could ever tell me.
Yeah.
It was something within me. And talking about respect, I mean, it feels very weird to imagine a whole lot of people in December sitting there on the beach, you know.
Yeah.
It doesn't feel very respectful.
No, for sure.
Actually.
Yeah.
And I think that when I started to push away from that relationship with the ocean, number one, to stop visiting the beach to perform this thing, but it rather being about wading into the wilderness with the deep knowledge that this thing can take my life.
Yeah, it can take and it can give life.
But it offers so much.
Yeah.
I think another defining moment of when you say you're scared, I'm also scared.
Yeah.
I'm scared of going under the water.
Yeah.
And part of that was because my niece
Drowned.
She fell into the pool.
Sure.
And it was so interesting, and that was when I was, how old were we? 23.
23, yeah.
It was so interesting because for the first couple of months the idea of putting my ears underwater and hearing what maybe she heard gave me such pain. It took me years. I think it took me about 2 years to wade into the ocean and go under and to feel the waves above me and to have a relationship with the surface of the water and see that it was so far away.
Yeah.
That breathing, there was space between my body and being able to breathe. And that was defined by the body of water between us.
Defined by water. Yeah.
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 And that definition gave me fear. It gives me fear. I really have to work through submergence into the ocean.